Hi, I am Eileen Chevalier, and my husband and I started a company called Night King Press this January. And we have one wing of the company is Docent, and that's kind of my baby. I have been doing education stuff for a really long time, and I have materials that I've developed and will put out through the Docent brand. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the Dodo philosophy, like how I create those products and how I intend for them to be used. And also just to kind of encourage you as a teacher, whoever and wherever you're teaching, if you in the coronavirus world have suddenly started teaching your kids and you've never done that before, or if you've been homeschooling for a long time, or if you're a public school teacher and you learn all these different philosophies and everything, but just kind of like making that practical and real for you. So I want to start with my background. I grew up as the daughter of two teachers. So my mom was an English teacher and a librarian, and my dad taught social studies. So he taught history and sociology and things like that. So there's always an emphasis about education in our home growing up. And my parents told me, just do your best. And we don't care like what your grades are or, they didn't care about the statistics. They just wanted me to do what I was capable of doing, which in retrospect was probably just an incredible amount of pressure for me because I'm a perfectionist. I was like maybe the worst thing for me because I was like, oh, but I could do better if I just spent like 30 more hours on this assignment. So kind of like wrapping your head around what motivates you and what demotivates you is really important to know like who you are as a person and as a learner, and to know who your students are as people and learners. I love my parents and they're an amazing influence on me. Obviously, I am now a teacher. As soon as I could teach, I did, and both of my sisters are teachers. So we just like really nerd out and talk about education a lot as a family. Girls' night, it's like all about students and teaching and curriculum and that sort of nerdy things. So when I was 5, before I ever went to public school, my parents, who were, like I said, both teachers, at that time in Louisiana, you could take a sabbatical. And so they did. So one semester they took, and then we traveled and saw many, many historical sites and went all over the United States. It was amazing. So I was 5. So I was basically homeschooling, did a lot of field trips, and sat in the car doing a little professor. It's super old, but it's a math game. It was like, the screen was this big and it just had 10 dots to make like a little picture of the little professor. But it was really exciting to me. So I loved like having the little professor bounce across that teeny tiny little strip of screen. And I learned all my math facts just from doing them repeatedly in the car. And then when I was 10, we left Louisiana and we came to North Carolina, but on the way, we didn't know where we were going. So we just traveled and homeschooled, and it was great. My sister would read lots of books and write really great papers, and I was really daunted by all of that. I now know that I'm dyslexic, so at the time I didn't. I just thought I was an idiot and I couldn't read well. It took me forever, but I did learn a lot, and I was able to do lots of other things, and I was able to have like really great discussions with my dad, who loved history, and as we traveled and talked about things, it was really great. And then my mom, as an English teacher, I think they were the perfect parents for me because I'm much more interested in math and science than their subjects. So they were able to impart their love and their passion for their subjects onto me, which was really helpful. So then 8th grade, fast forward, we're in North Carolina. Eighth grade is just a tough year. They're all tough years. For me, I was exhausted and really frustrated with some things that had happened, and I begged my mom to let me homeschool. And so she said, okay, at this semester you can do it. So I homeschooled my last semester of eighth grade, and I basically came up with my own curriculum and gave myself lots of assignments, and it was wonderful. I loved it. My dad would give me things to do, and then he would meet with me at lunch. We'd have like lunch meetings where he would talk to me about economics and current affairs and things like that. And then, so junior, senior year, I went to public high school for 2 years, but we moved. And the tuition to go to my old school in a different county was the same as going to college. And my parents already had one daughter in college, and they were like, no chance. So you can either go to the public school here where you don't know anyone, or you can homeschool and like do all your activities that you were doing with your high school. And so that's what I did. It was absolutely the most amazing thing. It was really, really great. It was perfect for me. Very introverted and very stressed out by school in a lot of ways, for lots of reasons. So I think those 2 years were just fantastic for me. So my senior year, I was actually able to take 14 credit hours at NC State, just like with all the regular college freshmen. And that was a great like transition into college for me as well. And I think part of what was really important about that, and I'll get more into this in a little bit, is that I was a junior in high school, and I made the decision to homeschool. And so my parents respected that decision. Like when I was in the 8th grade and I was like, I really, really want to homeschool, I was able to homeschool. And when my sister talked me into going to public high school, which was great. I'm super glad I did. But again, it was my decision. Like I could have decided to homeschool, or I could have gone to public school. And so I was able to make that choice. And as a junior, I was able to make that choice. And as a senior, again, I mean, I could have gone to public high school. I chose to continue and take classes at state. And I think having that autonomy as a learner to choose was incredibly important for me. Then in college, I did like Montessori summer camp, and I worked as a substitute teacher, which was super duper fun. Those elementary kids will they love a substitute teacher. They make like notes. They're super cute. I mean, middle schoolers, I mean, it was more fun because they liked the subject matter more. And then high schoolers are rough for me. They're kind of just like too cool for everything. My daughter's now in high school, and I love her, and she's amazing. But anyway, so when I graduated with my art and design degree, I immediately started teaching. I taught art as an interim art teacher, which was amazing, so amazing. They had a loom, and they had like a jewelry making thing, which I never used because it's like 2,000 degrees, and I wasn't about to do that with kids. But they had pottery wheels, and so like all the stuff I knew how to do, and I could do it with the kids, and it was super fantastic. Then, meanwhile, my room had windows, like a storage room. It was weird. Looked into the dance room, and I was like, dance teacher, because I danced like from middle school on a lot. And so the next 2 years, I got like a regular teaching position, not an interim position, teaching dance, and I loved it. But I wanted more, I think. So I did the New York City Teaching Fellows program. So while I was teaching dance, I was getting my teaching degree. So I started taking classes at ECU. And then when I was in New York, I was in a master's program. And so I did classes all summer, and then I did classes in the fall. And then I got super duper sick and came home and didn't finish my master's, which was like heartbreaking and devastating, but I was kind of just glad to be alive. Anyway, so I did a lot of those education classes, and then later, after I was married and after I had my kids and after I had already homeschooled my daughter kindergarten, my oldest, I did graduate school in order to teach, which obviously I'm not teaching in graduate in a college level, but that was my intention. So I took teaching classes there, which was really interesting. I took one that was specific to art and design, and then I did one that was just a college. I was really neat because I was in there with a bunch of people from a lot of different fields, and they had a lot of different goals in mind. So I was able to have these discussions about like, what is it that we want to see in our future classroom? Especially for me as an art and design person, my goals were really different from the science people and the English, the person who's going in to do English. And so, I mean, I guess in some ways, those two are more similar because it's that expression and clear communication. But anyway, so understanding what your goal is as a teacher and understanding who your students are, I think is just really important. So as a homeschool mom, I did all this research into like what kind of homeschool do we want to have? Do we want to do like classical? Do we want to do unschooling? Do we want to do Montessori? Do we want to do, I mean, obviously can't do like pure Montessori when you're just at home with your kids. But like what approach do we want to do? Do we want to be eclectic? Which is great because it's like really anything. Like when anyone asks you what you are and you're not sure, you just say you're eclectic and you're like, yeah. I just pull from a lot of different things. So I really resonated a lot with classical just because that's kind of what I felt like I had done as a learner. So when I was driving around when I was 5 and just learning my math facts because that's just what I was doing, and then that helped me with math forever. Just that like memorization really young. So that's part of classical, and that definitely influenced my thinking there with what to do with my kids. So we've done a lot of things. We've done like pre-scripted programs. We've done, obviously I've written curriculum as an art teacher. I decided what I wanted to do with my kids, and as a dance teacher, and I was a peer helpers teacher, which was sometimes really awesome. And I got a lot of autonomy. And so I had found the 7 Habits books, and they had 7 Habits for Teens, which I read because it was way easier than the 7 Habits for Adults book because I was dyslexic, but I didn't know. I was like, this one is so much more approachable. So I did that with them. That super influenced me and was just fantastic. Anyway, so some of the things that I did for math when the kids were little, I love math, and I really wanted my kids to love math. I'm not sure exactly how that turned out. They do math. They don't love it as much as me, but they love it maybe more than they would have. Like my oldest, she's not like naturally a math person, but I do love being able to work with her in math because she's like, oh, that's so much simpler. Like the way that I will approach math problems. Anyway, so that I was coming up with a lot. And then science, again, because I really love that, I was designing science curriculum because, man, there's just so much I didn't know, but so much I wanted to know. And my kids were little, so I was like, we're all just going to learn this together. And we did, and it was super wonderful. And then there were years when I was just busy and we were doing a lot of things and we really wanted community. And so we joined Classical Conversations. And that was like the first year was tough, I'm sure for lots of reasons. But I think finding a really good community is super important. So if you're going into a co-op situation, so there was another co-op that we were in for a few years, I think you have to find one that's a really good fit for you. Like even if, like for Classical Conversations, there's like a billion different communities and it's so hard to know, but if you can get to visit those people and the atmosphere is so important in there, and you as a homeschool mom, you're used to being in control. And I would recommend this for public school teachers as well. Like the second school I taught at was amazing. My principal was fantastic, and I loved working at her school. She set a tone, and expectations and just really supportive community feel. And the people that she brought in to do workshops, it was really great. So I think if you're going to do something that's in a community, like teach at a school or be part of a co-op community, you need to find out who those people are and if they resonate with you. And part of that is just knowing who you are and what you want. And I didn't really know what I wanted when I started. My principal said to me in the interview that we had, she was like, so nothing succeeds like success. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I've never heard that. But it's so true and so wonderful, right? So when a child or an adult feels successful, they are more likely to be successful, right? That confidence level is super important. And so I think that that is what she desired for her school, was for kids to feel important and confident so that they could be successful in what they were doing. This semester, I'm not sure what you guys are doing, but we started a business. This has been a little hectic. Fortunately, my daughter's in high school, 9th grade, and we were in CC last year, and I was asking the kids, like, what do you want to do next year? My son was adamantly opposed to going into Challenge AA, which I think was a good decision. I think that was the right decision for him. Because I was able to make decisions, I want to respect my kids' ability to make decisions about their education. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And then, once I started doing Aubins, like thinking about her high school, I just got really excited. And so last semester we did botany because I love botany. I have this whole curriculum. You can go look at that. But so we did botany, all of us together. So I have 3 kids, and my youngest is 10 and my oldest is 14. And so my oldest had more assignments than my youngest, but we would learn the lessons together, which was really great. And we were together, which we really enjoy. Like whenever at the end of the semester, we did like which classes did we like the best? And why did we like them? And what do we want to do next semester? And everyone agreed. We did it independently, and then we talked about what we had written to each other, and everyone independently said that they loved botany class the best because we were all together. Abin's in a totally different level reading and writing than my younger 2, and so those they did separately, and it's just more fun with a group, I guess. So, and I was also really excited, but I did fall asleep in class every day because it was so much information. Can't do that in public school. I was like, okay, guys, that's good. I'm just gonna go to sleep now. Anyway, it was great because then they could like finish teaching me the lesson that I couldn't get through, and that helped them to remember it, because whenever you teach, you learn. Anyway, so this semester has been different. So all my expectations of what this semester were going to look like kind of flew out the window, because starting a business is no joke. And so I would check in with them, like their math they do online. Like once they got older, I was like, I don't want to miss anything, because there's so many different math objectives. So even though I love math, like absolutely you're going to do it on the computer, and they're going to check all your answers for you and just give me the grade and show me how you did. And then you can just talk to me about it. And then they're reading, like now they're just reading stuff on their own and writing things on their own. And then I read it and it's great. So this semester didn't have, like, normally we have like specific writing assignments that they're doing. And then this semester I was just like, listen guys, I don't even care. I'm so busy. Just write whatever you want for an hour and type it up, and then we're good. And stuff they've come out with is amazing. My oldest daughter wrote a novel, like 80,000 words, and my son came up with this dystopian novel. He hasn't written 80,000 words. He's dyslexic like me. So it takes a little longer, but his story is amazing, and he works on it, and his dialogue is great. And my youngest is coming up with these like poetry song things and stories, and anyway, it's fantastic. So like I I thought unschooling was the hardest of all of them, and I was completely against it because I was like, you just have to, because I think I read about it and learned about this when the kids were really young. So I was like, yeah, you're like open for anything, but you also have to be like on it and ready to go for anything. You can't just be like, yeah, open your math program and just do it. You have to be like engaged. And I was like, I just don't know if I can have that level of engagement all the time. And now that my kids are older and they have all those basic skills down and can go out and find information for themselves, like my daughter started doing all these animation because they got into Khan Academy, and she's like, oh, they have this whole thing on animation. She'd tell me all about all the stuff that she learned all day, and it was fantastic. And I was like, awesome. I mean, there's extra stuff for you to learn, and you're interested, and you can tell me everything they said, and that's wonderful. So right now, that approach is working really well. So I think at different times, different approaches might work well for you depending on your life situation. However, you may just want to figure out what works for you and your students. So what works for you, there's like, it's like a Venn diagram, right? There's like what works for you and what works for your kid, and what you want to do is find what is with both of them. Because if you want to do something that your kid doesn't want to do, it's just not going to work, right? Or if your student needs something from you that you don't really want to give them, that you could give them, but you don't want to, or it's like really difficult for you, then you got to figure that out, right? Because it has to be that place where you match up together. It's just like, I've always thought of relationships like a chemical reaction. So, you know, there are all these elements, but they have their own properties. Like they have the inherent properties. That is what that element is like. And then when it combines with a different element, it interacts in a specific way with that element. But then it interacts with some other element and acts in totally, like, that way is really different. So depending on what you're combining yourself with, it's really different. So as a public school teacher, I would have classes like, I wrote my curriculum for my art. I had 2 classes that were the same. And so it's just like, oh, perfect. I have like 6 preps, but these 2 will be the same because it's the same class, right? No, absolutely not. After a week, maybe 2, it got so bad. It was so awful. So the one class loved it. It was great. The way I had set everything up was wonderful for them. The other class, it was untenable. I was about to lose my mind, and they hated me, and it just wasn't working. So over the weekend, I rewrote everything. I rewrote how it would work based on basically cultural differences. And after that, they loved it. They loved coming to class. They learned more than I could have ever taught them the way that I thought I was going to teach them. So I think it's really important as a teacher, yes, know who you are as a teacher, know what you want to do and what your goals are, but also know who your kids are and be able to respond to them and what they need. Like, and sometimes that's more difficult than other times. Like, my oldest learned to read before she just wanted to read when she was 4, and so I started teaching her. So by the time she got to 1st grade, which is when she went to public school, she was already like reading a bunch of books. And my son, on the other hand, it was like 2nd grade. Actually, he probably wasn't in 2nd grade. So my younger 2 are 2 years apart. So I guess he was just in 1st grade, and my youngest wasn't in kindergarten yet. She was 4, and so I'd work with him on like, what is this letter? You're still learning the letters, because he thought G and E were the capital and lowercase, because if you look at a lowercase E, it's like this, and if you look at a G, it's like this. So, I mean, obviously that's the same letter, right? If you're dyslexic. Anyway, even just like getting all that down took a really long time. So my youngest, because she'd been around and hanging out in the schoolroom with us, she would come up and tell him all the answers and how to read. So I was like, we'll do this together so I don't have to do this again. But it was still a really long process, and it was really hard. And so all my expectations of like, oh, my first kid's like reading in kindergarten and she's great and it's so easy. And then second kid, you're like, oh, you can read a sentence now and it's third grade, like totally different. And it's fine. Like, it's totally fine. That's where he's at. But he's a really different kid and I needed different curriculum. I went through so many different curriculums, so many different things. And some of them just weren't a good fit. Some of them were not a good fit for me. Some of them were just not helpful. Anyway, so that responsiveness, I think, is really important. So, and maybe different kids need different things. Like, I always thought it was weird, those parents who like came to CC and they were like, yeah, my other kid's doing this other program. And I was like, whoa, how do you do all of that? But I absolutely respect that. I think that's wonderful because this child needs this program and this child needs a different one because they're really different people, and that's okay. And it's just might be tricky to balance all of that out. So now we're going to get to my 3 topics, guiding principles, I call them, for Dodo. The first one is learning is an endless road. I'm just going to read this to you because it's already written down, and then I'll probably tell you some more stuff. There's always more to learn, to discover, to connect, to increase in mastery. Mastery is often seen as an endpoint, but we at Dodo believe that mastery is a state of sustained increase. Master gardeners will never master even a small fraction of the mystery of plants, but they have gained enough knowledge, skill, and innate understanding of plants to lead others down the path of discovery that they are on. It's all about the journey because there is no end, there's no boredom, there is no know-it-all. So I think as a teacher, there's this trap, right? Because you need to know the answers and you can just go ahead and like free yourself from that right now because you're going to be wrong. The books you learn things from are going to be wrong, and then they're going to change the rules about commas. And so all that stuff you learned, they're going to change the rules about spaces. So it's just like, even if you know it right now, you're not going to know it in 10 years. And so having that flexibility and that openness to knowledge and learning is incredibly important. And recognizing that, hey, these are these really awesome things I know, and there's a bunch of stuff we don't know, is essential. That's what was first. So the second one goes along with that. I'll just read you whatever I wrote for that one. Ask excellent questions. As a kid, okay, I'm not reading right now. As a kid, I always thought it was super dumb that people said there are no dumb questions. I was like, no, there are dumb questions, because I've heard the dumb questions. Like, there's a whole spectrum of questions, right? So I think the better the question, the better the answer. Because if you don't know what you want to know, then you won't be able to find it out, right? Or you might want to intentionally make your question such that you can discover what it is you want to discover. So here's what I wrote. There is always more to learn, so don't ever feel like you need to have all the answers. That's good news, since none of us do, not even the most veteran teachers. It's much better to have lots of questions. In fact, asking excellent questions is perhaps the most important skill any learner, student, teacher, gardener, doctor, citizen, can have. Rejoice when you come up with a question. If you can dig even deeper into that question to form a more fundamental question, that will lead you to a more fundamental truth. Too often, we ask questions that lead to answers that don't further our understanding. Learning to ask excellent questions is a skill like any other, so be patient as you and your students continue to develop that skill. So, questions. I mean, to me, that is where it's at. I was a Challenge 1 director for 2 years, and in classical conversations, there are a lot of questions like that. You learn the skill of asking like lots of different types of questions, which was super wonderful to me. I was like, yes, I love questions. And I remember getting stopped by a guy at the gas station one day who asked me a question about my bumper stickers. And you know what I did? I just asked him questions because I didn't have any answers for him. Like anything I could say to him was irrelevant, right? Like I can't convince anyone else of anything. But I remembered that really what you want to do is just ask good questions. And so I just asked him questions and then he would respond. And then I would ask him a question about that. I don't know if you guys know who Brian Regan is, but he's hilarious. And I don't remember what it is that he's a comedian that he's talking about. But he's like, I think he's talking about school and how he doesn't want to answer the teacher's questions. And so he's like, let me answer that question with a question, which I just love because maybe that is the answer to your question, is a deeper, more fundamental question. So anyway, I do really love questions. So if you'll see like in my curriculum, it's just like full of a bunch of questions. And I gotta say, like I've looked at other curriculums where they give you sample answers, and I don't do that because there's a serious danger in that. So my mom, as a librarian, she would have a lot of different teachers come in and do like little workshop classes in rooms in the library. And she told me the story about this teacher who was giving a class, and it had that. So it had like the sheet, and it had the question, and it had the answer. And this one kid in the room answered the question with an answer that wasn't on the sheet. And it was actually a brilliant answer. I don't remember it now, but I remember when she told me, I was like, that kid's very insightful. But it wasn't on the sheet. And so the teacher, like, I don't know, you know, it's hard when you're like on the spot or whatever to entertain that. Like if you already have something that you have in mind, you have an expectation. Expectations are really difficult to overcome. So I think if you set up an answer there, then you already have this expectation. So instead she basically told the kid he was wrong, which made him be silent and not confident and probably not want to answer another question, even though his question was so great. And my mom was just heartbroken because she was like, this poor kid now has been made to look the fool in front of a classroom, and he actually had a really important, extra, like helpful thing to say to everyone. So anyway, that's why I don't give answers, because there are a lot of answers, and you can ask the same question and get a different answer and get a different answer and get a different answer. And so sometimes like asking the same question multiple times is really helpful because you continue to dig into that subject. So I never want to give an answer because you can find out an answer, and you might be able to find out like 500 answers, and that's on you. Like I want that to be on you. Like we can talk about it and discuss it, and that will be wonderful. Like I just started a Facebook page for Dodo. So I mean, that'd be perfect, right? So you're like, I think I have an answer to this, but what do other people think? And you're like, well, here's what I think. And then other people can add and maybe tell you why they think you're not correct, or tell you why they think you are, or tell you how they think that there's this whole other thing that you haven't even seen yet. So you can do it there if you want to know what other people think and what other people's answers are. That's the other thing. I don't have all the answers, right? I got a lot of questions. I do have a lot of answers, but I don't have all the answers. And so it'd be super limiting if you only got the answers I could give you. I mean, that's crazy. You got to get answers from lots of people and lots of sources and really find that out for yourself. All right, third point. Seek answers. Here we are with answers with open eyes, mind, and heart. Life is far more complicated than we can begin to fathom. When seeking answers, we must first recognize the paradigms we currently possess and question how those assumptions will influence both our methods of research and our interpretation of data. It's huge. I mean, it's really huge. The reason Einstein's a genius is because he's creative, and he went, maybe all the paradigms we have are incorrect. Like maybe we should be more creative in the way we think. Maybe we should challenge the assumptions, but I'm getting off track. I'm going to get back to this. We must acknowledge that there is much that we cannot yet see. Always seek to understand your assumptions and how they are hindering your progress, because they are. My assumptions hinder my progress. I have beliefs that limit me. I have preferences that limit me. Like, understand what it is that's holding you back, and you can overcome that and go farther. Or you can just be like, yeah, I kind of like it here. But at least you know what you're doing. Brainstorming is an excellent way to expand your horizons. But what if? What else might cause this? What question would a geneticist, engineer, psychologist, farmer, dancer, some other person, what would they ask about this? Just as germs were once an invisible mystery, we are surrounded by the unknown and will never uncover new and deeper truths until we admit that the mystery exists. Then the hard work of asking those excellent questions and formulating methods of research that will lead to new discoveries begins. So, those are my, and I'm sure that those will continue to progress over time. But right now, for Docent, those are kind of my guiding principles and how I set things up. And I hope that that helps you. I hope that that gives you freedom to not need to know all of the answers. I know that as a teacher, you're often expected to know the answers. You're expected to know what your philosophy is. You're expected to know how you're going to run your classroom. You're expected to know all these things. But the more you understand and learn about yourself, and the more you understand and learn about your students, and the more you learn and understand about how we acquire knowledge, these things will continue to change. And I think that part of your educational philosophy, part of your teaching philosophy needs to be that you are going to learn with an open mind, because it's going to be okay if you change your mind. It's going to be okay if you learn something new and you develop and you get interested in something else and you get curious and you're like, wait a second, I've been doing it this way, but that looks really cool. And I want to learn more about that. You are a human being. You are evolving and changing all the time. And be okay with that. Be okay with that progression, and that makes life really interesting. And yeah. And if you're not doing that, you're stifling something that is innately human. That change, that progress is just part of who we are as human beings. And so don't limit that, and don't limit that with the students that you have, and don't limit it with you, and don't limit it with like where you're positioning yourself in the education world, I would say. So a couple of things, I wrote a few notes. I wrote, what does ready mean? There's a question for you. Are they ready for college? Like my oldest in high school, obviously I'm thinking about this a lot. Like, what does ready mean? Like, what is ready for the next step? Base of knowledge, but also, is it just about that? Like, is it about what she knows? Is it about her skills that she has? Is it about her curiosity level? Is it about her confidence? Like, I think that her confidence and her curiosity and her ability to question things is much more helpful than a set of skills that, I mean, she can learn a new set of skills, you know, in a year or 6 months or whatever, you know. Those are just tools. So it's much more important to have the goal, you know, like, what are you working towards? And so just having her be self-aware, or even my younger two, like having them be self-aware of like, what is it that I'm interested in? Why am I interested in that? And what's my actual goal? Like, what am I going for? And what will truly help me achieve that? And the other one I kind of alluded to already is the pace. Pacing is really different. You know, we learn at different paces. We learn to read at different paces. We learn to music at different paces. We don't stifle yourself. But do know where you're going. Like, do have a goal and an idea of what you want to accomplish, and don't make it just yours. Like, because if your student does not want to learn that, and then that's not their goal, you're done. You're done. So start with getting them excited and interested in whatever that is, and then they will go with it, right? And be there to support them and cheer them on, and pick them up when they get frustrated and say, well, let's look at it from a different angle and let's sleep on it. And maybe there are lots of like tools that you can use to break it down to make it easier for them. But know those are available and you can find them. What else? I think that your mindset is super duper important. Okay, I know this has been really long already, but I'm gonna tell you one more story. It'll be my last story, and then I'm gonna give you 2 book recommendations. So I taught nuclear fusion to my 4-year-old. So I had a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and in my science class that I was writing for them, super excited about, we were learning all about space, and I just wanted to understand it myself. And so I was like, this is awesome. So I taught I taught all of them, but my point is that you can be really young and you can understand this. So the way I taught them, I'm a very kinesthetic person. So I tend to, and maybe I should put this in the Dodo like philosophy stuff, because the way I create things is very tactile. So I don't have them near me, but I created these flashcards for students to learn botany with, because you can move them around. They're very tactile. So they have different bits of information on the back, and there's an older set that isn't done yet, and there's a younger set that is in production right now. But they're very tactile, so you can move them, and they're meant to be played with, and they're meant to be rearranged, and they're meant to be compared with one another and grouped, and there's like progression. So it's like, oh, here's one thing, and then, oh, and here's more on this one, and here's more on this one. So you're like accumulating knowledge. So it's not a textbook. It's not a first page, second page, third page. It's this much more fluid, much more interactive thing that happens. I'm super into journaling, probably because I went to art school, and I love journaling. I love a good journal. I love some really good pens, and I am a visual learner and a kinesthetic learner, and so writing and seeing it and having that all written down is really helpful for me. So I want my kids to do that. May or may not be as helpful for them as it is for me. I do want my kids to learn how they learn. So that's been an interesting process as well. But I will give journal activities in my stuff. And then the other thing that I really do, just saw the questions. I think that's the other one. Oh, so kinesthetic stuff. Nuclear fusion, right? So we learn nuclear fusion by running around the room and running into one another. We learn Kepler's laws of motion, laws of planetary motion, by running around the room and physically doing what the planets are doing. And so there's a way that this goes into your brain when you have a physicality with it. So when I was a dance teacher, there was this other teacher. She didn't actually have a dance classroom, but she would partner with teachers and use dance to teach whatever subject they were teaching. Her stories were amazing. I loved it. I was like, that's so great. So, I've got this like librarian, go look everything up and define all your stuff. Art background, dance background, all that comes together. I just think the more ways that you can learn something, the better that is. So my 4-year-old can explain nuclear fusion. My mom was just like ridiculously impressed. Especially coming from that like public school world, she's like, are you, not that my mom doubted me, but I think there's always this like, as a homeschool mom, you don't have that person looking over your shoulder. So like, are you going to accomplish whatever it is you need to accomplish? And first you need to determine what it is you're going to accomplish and what you want to accomplish. And absolutely you can, right? There's a lot of ways to do it, and just keep working until you find them if you don't find it right away. So then, fast forward, I'm teaching a science class. I'm in training to teach that science class. And something came up about basically nuclear fusion. And I made a statement about nuclear fusion. And literally, I hadn't taught this class before. I hadn't even seen the book. I'm in there with all teachers who have taught it before, some of them for many years. And they all look at me and they're like, no. What are you talking about? Like, that doesn't even seem like it's right to us. And so I felt really dumb, right? I was like, this is what I taught my kids. This is what I researched. This is what I found. And this is what I taught them. And I just don't even, and then I was like, well, what about like, other things that, like, I was pointing out other like things that we have in our world and how they work there. And they're still just like, no. So I went home and yeah, I was totally correct. Come to find out, it's in the textbook that we teach from. There it is. It's like right there. Like the exact stuff that I said is in the textbook. And these people who have taught from that textbook before were arguing with me about it. And so I think that's fine. I mean, they just didn't know. But I think what for me that did was I saw this need to have already known, you know, that like I need to be the teacher, I need to know it, and if it doesn't seem right to me, then I'm just going to dismiss it, which is a lack of curiosity, right? Or a lack of being able to challenge your assumptions. And when you're young, you're like, oh, cool, let's run around the room, and I just learned how to do this thing. And I did it with lots of things like the water cycle. It's super fun. I think you should totally do that with your kids. And then, you know, how I did it with my students for nuclear fission. We would do like this physical interactive exercise. Anyway, it's super fun. It's a great way to learn. But if you are not in the mindset that you have a lot to learn, then you're only going to learn like nothing. If you think that you've already learned whatever it is that you need to learn, then you're not going to learn anymore, and you're not going to learn that you're wrong. So it's okay. I am telling you this, but I'm telling myself, right? Like, it is okay to be wrong, and it's okay to learn, and it's okay to grow, and it's okay to not have it all right and to not have a full understanding. But I would say it's really limiting if you're willing to stay there. So for me, there's not a problem with you not knowing it all right now, but there is a problem if you're not willing to be open to learning more and discovering more and realizing that you were wrong, and that's okay. It's like, it's not okay in our society for you to be wrong, or you to go, oh, you know what, actually, this political idea or this social idea or whatever, this religious idea that I thought was totally correct, like now I'm rethinking that and I'm realizing that's wrong, and I'm going to change, and I'm believing in something different, and I'm going to live my life in a different way. Like, that is seen as really frightening and unacceptable to a lot of people. But I mean, this is just life, right? We're just learning stuff. And if you're not willing to learn and be challenged and to grow from that and to be able to change based on the things that you find out, then you are limiting yourself. And so I would encourage you as a teacher to model that for your students and go, oh, I didn't get that. I didn't understand that. But now I do. And so now I'm going to make this change. Like, even in the way that you teach, going, oh, you know what? I realize that you guys, when we first come into class, we need to have this activity that like focuses us or gets us engaged with one another or helps us to disengage from whatever it is we were just doing. And so let's try this and see how it works. You know, like, you can model that with your students in coming up with new things and seeing how they work. 2 books that I really love. I already have mentioned one of them, which is the 7 Habits book. Man, it's so great. There's, I think there's one for kids now. I haven't read that one. The one that I used was the teens. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And there's a workbook that I used with my peer helper kids, and it was super great. I loved it. I've made my kids read it. And then the mindset book, which is so good. So my son and I are like, he's just a miniature version of me in a lot of ways. The dyslexia thing, like I started suspecting he was dyslexic, and then I start reading all these things, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this explains my world. And then he was struggling with, like, he's like me, a perfectionist. And I was like, buddy, I really think this book is going to help you. This mindset book, because I think you're like, you get really frustrated with yourself. I think it's really going to help you. And so, of course, we listen. We do a lot of audiobooks, especially as dyslexics. It is the way to go. It's so good. So anyway, we both listened to it, and within the week, he was like, oh, he would catch himself. He'd start arguing with me about something, and then he'd go, oh, I'm having a fixed mindset, and I'm not a growth mindset. And so I'm limiting myself in this way. And so that book is fantastic. I think there might be some parts of it that you might not want your younger kids hearing. So you might not want to do an audiobook unless your kids are a little older. Plus, they might just not be ready for it. But it's a great thing for everyone, I think. It's so good. So I think that's about it. This probably took forever. So thank you for hanging in there and listening to me blabber on and on. I love teaching. It is so fantastic. My husband used to pick me up from grad school. We only had one car. So he picked me up from class. And when he picked me up from my TA classes, I taught 2-dimensional design. He was like, you glow. When you get in the car, you're like glowing. You're so excited. And you just had such a great experience talking to kids and teaching and learning and figuring things out together. And man, you could just tell, like, as soon as he saw me, he was like, yep, those are when I pick you up those times, you love life and you love what you're doing. And so I want, whether you wanted to be a teacher or whether you didn't want to be a teacher or whether you did want to be a teacher, but now you kind of hate it, I hope that I can encourage you in that and just share, like, my love of teaching. And so if you want to follow us at Dodo and write to me, then absolutely do that. I'd love to talk to you and hear about your experiences. And we can ask each other really good questions. Thank you. Bye.